So welcome to Ableton Live. Now that we know where all of our sounds and files live, let's get in and start using them and start getting familiar with the tool. I'm going to provide an overview of the tool. Much of this you might already know, but there are going to be a few fine details in there that could be helpful and help speed up things along the way. The basic workflow of Ableton Live is quite unique, and it involves two main windows. This is the default window. It's called the session view, and you can see it in the upper right-hand corner. It has this vertical icon. That's because the tracks go up and down. If I hit the tab key or click this horizontal button, it brings me to the arrange view. You can see it has horizontal lines because the tracks go side to side. Again, the tab key brings you back and forth. Very handy. We're going to spend the first half of the course here in the session view. It's an interesting window, and I have found it to be extremely powerful and has sped up my workflow dramatically, as opposed to the traditional arrange view where you build everything from left to right, start to finish. I found over the years that making music horizontally, linearly, from the beginning to the end is a very slow way of going about it. And since we're trying to help you make better music faster, I think speeding up is very important. So we'll get into the details of the two windows over time, but for now, session view, arrange view, back and forth with the tab. Each of these vertical tracks represents a collection of ideas that play one at a time. Each of these little boxes is called a clip slot, and only one of them can play at a time per track. Right now I have 4 tracks, 2 audio tracks, 2 MIDI tracks. I actually have 3 other tracks, 2 return tracks, which are usually reserved for effects, and then the master track. Now you'll see the master track has these funny things, which are not empty clip slots. These are known as scenes or scene launchers. While the tracks go up and down, each of the horizontal rows can be thought of as a collection of sounds that can all play at once. When you click this play button, all of the clips on that row will trigger at once. So, session view, arrange view, clip slots, audio tracks. You can see if I click on the title bar of the track is highlighted. Return tracks, and a master track with scene launches. On each track, there are a variety of functions. We'll get into some of these monitor things in the next section when we talk about recording. Some of the simple things are pan left, pan right. You can see I'm sort of fiddling with the pan button to get it right back to 0. It can be quite sensitive, so if you really don't want to struggle with getting it exactly at 0, no matter where it is, double click it and it zeroes out. Now, I grabbed a guitar sample from Loop Cloud earlier. I'm just going to drag it into the clip slot. And now you can see it fills the slot. It's red. It takes the same color as the track. Nice and convenient. And it has its own play button. So you can trigger clips individually, or you can trigger them in a collection with the scene. For right now, I'm just going to hit play and demonstrate the pan, on, off, solo, and volume. I can click play here. I can click play here. I can click play here. There are times when you want to hit each of them. This play button is usually reserved for the arrange view, but it can also be triggered simply hitting the space bar. And then the space bar stops it. Pretty common. Now notice that the clip button is still showing active and green. What it's saying is that when you hit play, this clip will trigger. If you want to have this clip not trigger when you play, there's a stop button right down here. So I'm going to let it play, and I'm going to pan it, and just for fun, I'm going to grab a drum loop. I'm going to go to samples and just type in beat, and I'm going to go to my favorite 80s beat, and I'm going to drag it over here, just so that we have two things to compare and contrast. And if I hit play on one, did you see this little circle going around? It's marking time to let you know how long the loop is and when it's coming around to start the loop over again. It's also playing at my tempo, which happens to be 90. Feels a little slow to me, so you can simply click on it, type in 120 if you prefer. And now it's a country hoedown. If you trigger the second clip, you'll notice a few things. Number one, both clips played. Remember, if the green play button is active, it will play no matter when you hit play. The second thing you probably noticed is that they both triggered in perfect time. There's a reason for that. It's called warping. It's one of Live's superpowers. We're going to dig into that a little bit later. It's quite intense. But for right now, Know that almost everything that comes into Ableton will likely be warped and is designed to immediately work at the tempo with everything else that's playing. Now I'm going to hit play again, and I'm just going to show you a couple of things you can do real quick to make sure your music plays the way you want to hear it. For me, the drums and guitar are a little loud. I'm going to play with the volumes, and I'm going to play with the pan a little bit. Now you noticed I got the same effect by either soloing the guitar or deactivating the drums. Same effect, different technique. With a solo, only this track will play no matter what else is playing. With the deactivated, everything else will play except the deactivated tracks. Now, the idea is you can take all manner of sounds and start loading them up into each of your tracks. You can see I'm randomly grabbing things and throwing randomly on the tracks. Even the colors aren't necessarily coming across with the same color as the track. Only the first one does that. You probably want to use a more structured approach. So if I undo this, anything that's new should probably come to the empty field, and it will create a brand new track. If you want to organize them, you can click and hold and simply drag the tracks left and right. If you're not using MIDI tracks, you can highlight them and delete them. Now watch what happens if I grab 4 different sounds and lay them on the track. If I hit play right now, which are going to play? All 4? Just 2? Just 1? None? The answer is only the 2 that have the green button. So if I hit the play button, why don't I hear the drums? Because the track is deactivated. You're going to find that you're going to run into all sorts of issues like this over and over again. You're going to look for some of the common places. Is the play button green? Is the track active? So if I hit play, you'll get both tracks. Now you might have noticed that while these pie charts were circling around, these horizontal lines were moving to the right. They're just marking time as to where this clip would be if I hit play. And you can see it's a very short sound. If you double click the clip, it'll show you exactly what's going on there. The lower pane changes to match the content that fits the clip. And you can see there's just a crackle, crackle, and then silence. If you want to solo it to really identify it, you can do this. Very short sound, probably not useful. I'm actually going to get rid of this. So if we look at this third one, let's hit play. Now I lowered the volumes of the others, so clearly I have to lower the volume of this one. And if you're not sure if you have to or not, you can always look at the master fader. If you see red, be afraid. You always want to avoid red on the master fader. So I'm going to turn this one down as well. And I'm actually going to deactivate them. So now if I hit play, nothing happens because there are no green play buttons. However, if I want all 3 to play at once and there are no green buttons, instead of having to activate each of them individually, I can simply trigger them all with the scene. You've already seen the basic workflow of Ableton. You search for clips and or samples and or musical ideas that are already built by other people, and you grab them and you drag them into Ableton, either onto a MIDI track, onto an audio track, or into the empty space on its own track. Now, as you can see, I'm defaulting to putting everything on a single row, but I don't have to. I can move this down here, I can move this over here, and put this all over here. And if you click play and get them all active and ready, when you hit the play button here, or the space bar, they will all play. Or if I trigger any of them, they all will play. However, if I trigger a scene, only the clips on that scene will play. So that's a little bit on the relationship between the clips, their slot, the clip slot that they live in, and what row they live in with respect to each scene. Scenes are going to be very, very handy, and we'll use them quite liberally later. For right now, I think what I'm going to do is clear up some of this, and I'll go back to my original collection of sounds. If you're really just beginning with Ableton Live and you don't play piano, don't play an instrument, have never done anything like this before, the vast majority of the early part of your work is going to be involved with finding clips, finding samples, dragging them into the clip slots, and organizing them in a way where you have some really interesting collections of ideas. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go over to my Ableton sample pack, and I've got my loop cloud sounds. I'm going to open up from the dirty trap step, and let's get some drum loops. I think I'm going to lose this EDM, and I'm going to lose this 80s beat, and we're actually going to lose the guitar. Now watch what happens if I try to erase the final track. Notice Ableton won't let me. Ableton insists on having at least one track at a time. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Command T, which is the shortcut to create an audio track. And now I can get rid of this track. Notice when there are two tracks, the new track takes the number 2, and the second I get rid of the first one, it renumbers as number 1. It's quite handy. Ableton always numbers the tracks from left to right. So let's go have some fun. I'm going to grab some hi-hat loops. As soon as you click on a track, as long as this blue headphone icon is activated, it will trigger and it will give you a preview. I think that's fun. I'll grab that one. Let's grab some more. That might be fun. I'll use that. Oh, I like that one as well. Now you can see there are no wrong answers. I could have put these right next to each other and done all of my hi-hats horizontally, but I don't think that's a smart way to organize it, because if I trigger the scene, I'm getting all the hi-hat loops at once. That may be what you want. It's not what I want. I'm going to organize them vertically on a single track so that I know that this track is a hi-hat loop. Now it says 1 TS hi-hat loop. If you want to shorten it, you can click on the title and hit Command R to rename, or rename. Command R, and I'm just going to call this hats. The reason I give it a short name is because if I want, I can actually shrink the track itself. The more parts you put in horizontally, the more likely you're going to want to keep things nice and short and tight and tidy and keep your organization together. I think I'll put it back for now. Yeah, just enough to read the words. That'll be fine. Okay, so there are some hi-hat loops. I'm going to deactivate the track so that I can keep searching for sounds. And this is part of the workflow. What can be fun is listening to loops without listening to the related loops and putting together some interesting combinations that you wouldn't necessarily think to do on your own. I like that. I'm going to grab that one, put it over here. What's going on here at the end? Ooh, that'll be fun at the end. I'll put it over here. You can also click anywhere in this file and it'll trigger from that point. The space bar stops playback. And let's find one more kick loop. Well, that's a different sound. Let's put that in there. Again, I have no idea how these loops are going to work together, but that's part of the fun. I'm going to deactivate the kick and go looking for some snares. It's typical for drums to have kick, snare, hat. It's pretty typical. We'll grab that one. Not much different. That's a little different. We'll grab that one. Not sure how different that's going to be, but we'll grab it anyway. And for fun, what else should we do? Let's just grab a couple of one hits. Let's grab a clap. There's a simple clap. I like this first one. I'll put that in there also. And, ooh, let's grab that one. Okay, let's pause here for a moment because I already have 4 tracks. I have 12 collections of clips. And to be honest, I have no idea what they're going to sound like together. So again, part of the basic workflow of Ableton is to find clips, grab them, drag them, and then organize them in collections that make sense. I don't know if these make sense yet, so I'm going to audition them. And I'm going to hit the stop button. I'm going to activate all of the tracks. And I know things were a little loud before, so I'm going to bring down the volumes. And you can see it's quite painful to go one at a time. So if you want to do everything all at once, let's undo. You can simply click on the title of one track, hold Shift, click on the title of the last track to select them all, and then you can bring them all down at once. Now with the click going, I'm only hearing the click because I have a 1-bar count off. And if I click here and get rid of the count in, I won't have that. Notice this is not your count off. This is your global quantize. You need to get to that little disclosure triangle and change the count off. Now when I hit play, it's just going to go play. I'm only hearing the click, and I haven't triggered a sound. Let's start with the first hi-hat. I think we'll do this without the click for now. Let's put the kick loop in. Now watch what happens when I click on it at the downbeat. See how they started in perfect time, both at the beginning of their loops? That doesn't have to work that way. If I stop each of them, this is where the global quantize comes in. Right now, what this is saying is that when I hit play here, the second I hit play here, it's going to wait for the next bar marker before it triggers this one. Now, this loop, as you can see, is 4 bars. It goes from measure 1 to measure 5, which means it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, all the way out to 5. And when it hits 5, it starts over at 1. This one is also a 4-bar loop. But what happens if I trigger this one at bar 2 and this one at bar 1? More interesting results. Here comes 2. Notice it works musically, but it's not necessarily the way these things were designed to play. If I deactivate tracks 3 and 4 and trigger the scene, they'll both start together at the beginning of their measures. Now, the loops admittedly are fairly self-similar, so the musical difference is subtle in this case, but in many cases it will not be. So you might want to set your global quantize from 1 bar up to 4 bars to make sure that every 4-bar loop only starts at the beginning of the bar. In fact, let's do that. I'm going to set it to 4 bars, and I'm going to turn on the click, and I'm going to hit play. And when this does click 2, 3, 4, I'll trigger this one, and then I'll trigger this one, and then I'll trigger this one, and watch what happens. Now, I had these deactivated, but all 3 of these turned on at the next 4-bar marker. So again, we'll go back to 1 bar just to keep things together. But these are some fun and interesting ways you can use loops and play with them and perhaps trigger them in ways when they weren't meant to go together and get some very interesting results. If I activate all 4 of them, this is the collection of all 4 together. Now you'll notice the clap hit once and then never came back. Its play button turned off after it played once. Let's watch that again. The second the playhead reached the end of the clip, it stopped. And that's because the loop is not active. Loop and warping are tied together. We'll see that a little bit later in more detail, but if you really want this to loop, you have to activate warp, and then you can loop it, and you can give it a length. Right now, it's only 2 beats long, so if I try to give it 4 bars and hit 0, see how it adds this dead space to the clip so that it triggers on the bar line. Now let's do it again. Actually, let's make that 2 bars just so that we don't have to wait that long. And that's how you make loops. Remember, looping is off unless warping is on.